This is Jed Distler, and welcome to The Piano Maven, your friendly podcast guide to piano recordings. You can subscribe to this podcast through my Substack page by clicking on the link in the episode description. Paid subscribers get bonuses such as Piano Maven Zoom meetings, where we will listen to music together and also we'll have some special guests. So please consider subscribing to help us reach out further into the piano community and to keep this podcast in production. I continue my survey of recommended recordings for each of the 32 Beethoven piano sonatas. I recommend 2 recordings for each sonata, 1 historic or archival recording, and 1 modern recording from the stereo or digital era. And my goal is not to repeat a pianist over this process, so that in the end we will be discussing 32 sonatas and 64 pianists, and I think all of these performances have great distinction and there are no weak links in the batch. So, at the halfway point, I said that about Opus 28. Well, we still are in the halfway area, which is middle period Beethoven, or just about the cusp of middle period Beethoven. It's kind of curious that the delightful and inventive Sonata in G major, number 16, which is Opus 31, number 1, doesn't often turn up by itself on recital programs. It's probably the least performed of the 3 Opus 31 sonatas in concert, although I did hear Emanuel Ax play it at Carnegie Hall some years ago. I've always felt the way that the chords in the first movement's first theme are slightly out of sync, making a kind of kerplopping effect. I think what happened here is that Beethoven wanted to make fun of pianists who had trouble playing chords together in both hands. The slow movement is a long and leisurely aria, and one might argue that this movement goes on just a tad too long. I know that's sacrilegious to say, but to make this movement work, I think you really have to hit on just the right tempo. If it's too slow, you're in trouble. But if you're too fast, you will sound flippant. I mean, for flippant, try Glenn Gould's recording, where the decorative runs go like a bat out of hell. I mean, it's fun to listen to, but it's hardly indicative of Beethoven's grazioso directive. Actually, I'm going to talk about my chosen modern recording first, and that's the recording by Richard Good on Nonsuch. I think he makes the most of those kerplunking effects that I talked about in the first movement, and he times these kerplops to very varied effect. His slow movement is ideally paced, not too fast, not too slow, while his finale is a model of disarming grace, and it's so full of character. For the historic recording recommendation, there's actually an interesting recording, and it preceded the one of Arthur Schnabel. This was a recording by the Chilean pianist Rosita Renard. This was one of her relatively few 78s, and her playing has great joy and vitality and color, and her beautifully sculpted long trills in the slow movement really stand out. Also, how she balances the themes and counter melodies in the last movement. She does so with total independence of the hands without any effort at all. Now, the sound is a little boxy and dry in this recording. I think it's from 1928. I was too lazy to check. But, I mean, it's an old recording. But Rosita Renard's artistry fully communicates in this performance, and as such, I thought that it would be a good historic recommendation. This is Jed Distler, and you've been listening to The Piano Maven, your friendly podcast guide to piano recordings. So the next time we talk about a very familiar sonata, Beethoven's Tempest Sonata, Opus 31, number 2. Watch the space, as the cliche goes. Take good care.